ever stop to think that just being alive, figuring things out day by day, is a kind of grand, ongoing experiment? We're constantly learning, adapting, trying new approaches. It's this fundamental part of what it means to be human, isn't it?
That's a really insightful way to kick things off, and it perfectly sets the stage for what we're exploring today.
Yeah.
The listener has sent in some fascinating material titled Where the Human Experiment Meets Artificial Intelligence. And our goal is to really dig into this core idea, this continuous human experiment, and see what it reveals about our existence, especially, as AI becomes more and more intertwined with our lives.
Exactly. The sources we have here really unpack this human experiment from all sorts of angles, looking at our deep history right up to our constant search for meaning and well-being. There are definitely some unexpected connections in here, and I'm betting we'll have a few of those aha moments as we go. Okay, so this central idea, human experiments, is this nonstop process of existence, adaptation, and the quest for meaning. It's not about white coats and labs, right?
No, not at all.
It's more like a lens through which to view the entire human experience.
Precisely. The material emphasizes that this isn't about formal ethical trials, but rather the inherent process of trying, observing, and adjusting that comes with being human.
Okay.
Consider the fundamental elements: birth, the continuous process of learning, our complex emotions, our aspirations, our capacity for reason, our sense of right and wrong, the conflicts we encounter, and ultimately mortality.
Right.
These are the backdrop against which this experiment of living plays out. And a crucial element here is what the source terms supple adaptation.
The supple adaptation.
Yeah.
I like that. It really captures the idea of being flexible in how we deal with the world around us, not just having one set response for every situation.
Yeah, it's fascinating because life, especially human life, isn't a fixed state. It's a dynamic dance, maintaining our identity while constantly interacting with and adapting to our ever-changing environment. This supple adaptation allows for an incredible range of responses to unpredictable shifts, unlike systems with rigid programming.
Right, like a computer program.
Exactly. And of course, humans extend this far beyond the biological realm with our capacity for cultural and social adaptation. This inherent flexibility, which has been key to our survival, might be both our greatest strength and vulnerability as we increasingly interact with AI systems that operate on, different principles of adaptation.
Right, because we don't just rely on our own individual learning, we build on what others have figured out over generations, creating these incredibly intricate social structures and technologies.
Absolutely. The source highlights how this collective learning process is absolutely vital to these human experiments. Think about the global spread of Homo sapiens.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been possible without rapidly developing new knowledge, tools, and social organizations to thrive in vastly different conditions. Cultural adaptation often outpaces genetic evolution, giving us a very agile way to respond to instability. And it's a continuous feedback loop. Individual innovations reshape culture, and culture in turn shapes the environment for individuals.
And at the heart of all this progress is just trying things out and seeing what happens, a good old trial and error.
Exactly. That's a huge part of it.
We've learned so much by experimenting, seeing what works, and letting go of what doesn't.
Exactly. The source points out that advancements in knowledge, technology, and even the way our societies are structured have heavily relied on this process. From scientific breakthroughs to technological innovations and the evolution of social norms, it's all about repeated attempts, keeping the successes and, discarding the failures.
Right.
Even biological evolution itself can be viewed as a massive trial and error process over vast timescales.
Okay, but it's not just about figuring out how things work and surviving, is it? There's this whole other dimension about finding meaning in our lives.
Yes, that's the existential aspect. It's crucial. The source delves into existentialist philosophies that emphasize that in a universe that doesn't come with a prepackaged meaning, we humans have this unique responsibility and freedom to create our own.
Freedom, yeah.
Sartre's idea that existence precedes essence is key here. In essence, this means that we are not born with a preset nature or destiny. We are constantly becoming through our choices, making the human experiment a truly open-ended and self-authored one. We define ourselves through what we do.
So this freedom to create meaning, it's almost like the ultimate human experiment in itself.
Precisely. But with that freedom comes responsibility, and often, as the source notes, feelings of anxiety when we face uncertainty and what some call the absurd. This fundamental conflict between our human desire for meaning and a seemingly indifferent universe. actively participating in creating that meaning, both individually and collectively, is a really central part of this experiment of life. Perhaps the rise of AI, by automating tasks that once provided meaning, will force us to more consciously confront and redefine what gives our lives purpose.
It makes you wonder, when did this continuous human experiment really begin?
Well, the source makes a really important point here. There isn't one single starting point. It's a continuous unfolding that happens at multiple levels. From an evolutionary perspective, it began with the very first emergence of life and that fundamental drive to survive and adapt. For our own lineage, that's millions of years of hominin evolution.
Right, the move to walking upright, the development of tools, the growth in brain size, all that.
Exactly. And then the appearance of Homo sapiens with our advanced cognitive abilities and complex culture. The source highlights how behaviorally modern humans emerged in Africa around 70,000 years ago.
70,000, wow.
Yeah, and their subsequent global expansion 50,000 to 60,000 years ago truly demanded rapid and diverse adaptations to all sorts of new environments. It seems culture itself co-evolved with brain size during periods of environmental instability, suggesting it's a really crucial adaptive mechanism.
And then we have the historical perspective, the rise and fall of civilizations, the invention of everything from language to sophisticated technologies to complex political systems.
What's fascinating here is how social learning has been a constant thread throughout history. From ancient oral traditions to the philosophical dialogues of Plato and Confucius to the explosion of knowledge sharing during the Renaissance and Enlightenment.
Right.
And of course, the history of science, like the development of physics, shows this continuous process of refining our understanding through observation and experimentation. Each era presents new challenges that prompt further societal experiments.
And on a personal level, this experiment starts anew with each individual who is born.
Precisely. With the dawning of consciousness and that lifelong journey of learning and interacting with the world, the development of our personalities, as the source discusses referencing Roussan, is shaped by our experiences within our families and social circles, where feedback helps us to understand ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah.
And existentially, that individual experiment of creating meanings starts with the realization of our own freedom and responsibility.
It sounds like instability, both in our environment and in our social structures, has been a really significant catalyst for all these experiments. Like, change forces us to try new things.
That's a key insight. The source points out that our capacity for complex culture, which allows for rapid adaptation, really flourished during periods of significant environmental change.
Interesting.
So it appears that challenges and uncertainties aren't just obstacles. They're fundamental drivers of innovation, learning, and adaptation. When established ways of life no longer work, we're compelled to experiment with new solutions.
So this whole continuous human experiment,
Mm-hmm.
what's the underlying drive? What's it all, leading towards?
Yeah.
Or is that even the right question?
That's the fundamental question, isn't it? And the source emphasizes that there isn't one single predetermined answer. It's a complex interplay of different motivating forces.
Okay.
At the most basic level, there's the biological imperative for survival and adaptation. Your initial thought about relieving suffering and extending life really gets at this core drive.
Yeah, it's ingrained in us. That instinct to survive feels pretty basic.
Beyond that, though, there's this ongoing striving for well-being and an improved quality of life. This encompasses everything from physical health to emotional positivity, engaging in activities that feel meaningful, having strong relationships, experiencing a sense of accomplishment, and having a degree of security. The PERMA model, which stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments, offers a framework for understanding the key elements of well-being and really captures these core aspects.
Right.
So your desire to be wealthy, healthy, and feel good all the time aligns with this broader human pursuit.
Okay, so survival and trying to live well, that makes a lot of sense. But the source also brings up Viktor Frankl and this concept of the will to meaning. How does that fit in?
What's fascinating here is Frankl's idea that the primary driving force in humans isn't just pleasure or power, but this deep inner need to find and fulfill a purpose in life. He argued that this will to meaning is so powerful that it can even help people endure immense suffering if they are connected to something they find meaningful.
So it's deeper than just feeling good.
Exactly. Even the desire to feel good all the time has a bit of a deeper angle, according to the source. While positive emotions are certainly a part of well-being, many philosophical and psychological perspectives suggest that true flourishing and profound meaning often emerge from navigating and overcoming challenges, not just the absence of discomfort.
That's interesting.
Frankel's work really highlights finding meaning through suffering, not merely avoiding it. So while AI might assist in alleviating certain kinds of suffering, constantly striving for just feeling good might actually prevent us from experiencing deeper growth and a richer sense of purpose.
This human experiment sounds like it has had some pretty significant and far-reaching effects. How has it actually shaped us and the world around us, like biologically even?
The source material really breaks this down into several important dimensions. Let's start with the biological and genetic aspects. A crucial concept here is gene culture coevolution.
Gene culture. Okay.
It's not just our genes that influence us. Our cultural innovations, our behaviors, technologies, social structures actually create new selective pressures that can drive genetic changes over generations. This fascinating feedback loop highlights how our cultural innovations can literally change our biology over generations, demonstrating the profound interconnectedness of our genes and our societal practices in this ongoing experiment.
Like the well-known example of dairy farming and how some populations develop lactose tolerance as adults. Is that an example?
Exactly. That's a perfect example. The cultural practice of raising cattle for milk created a survival advantage for those who could digest lactose as adults in those communities.
Right.
Conversely, our genetic predispositions can also influence the likelihood of certain cultural traits emerging. And because cultural evolution happens much more rapidly than genetic evolution, it's a really powerful and flexible way for us to adapt to new environments.
So it's this constant back and forth.
Exactly. This interplay is constantly shaping our biological makeup. And it underscores our remarkable biological plasticity, our ability to adapt to incredibly diverse environments, diets, and lifestyles, as we've seen throughout our global migration.
And then there's the profound impact of all our experiments in medicine and public health. Vaccines, sanitation.
Absolutely. Think about the development of vaccines by individuals like Jenner and Pasteur, the implementation of sanitation practices, improvements in nutrition. These have dramatically improved our health and significantly increased our lifespan.
Yeah, hugely.
But the source also astutely points out that these benefits haven't been distributed evenly across all populations. There's still considerable progress to be made in that area. And sometimes our cultural changes happen so quickly that our biology can't keep pace, leading to what are sometimes called diseases of civilization, like obesity and diabetes.
The mismatch?
Right. It's also important to remember that not all cultural experiments are biologically adaptive in the long run. Sometimes we can become attached to beliefs or practices, even if they are detrimental to our long-term health or survival.
Moving beyond our biology, how has this human experiment shaped our history and our diverse cultures? That seems vast.
Well, the entire history of humanity can essentially be seen as a record of our collective experiments in how to organize ourselves, how to innovate technologically, and how to express ourselves culturally. A key aspect here is cumulative cultural evolution, this ratchet effect.
The ratchet effect.
Yeah, where each generation builds upon the knowledge and skills of those who came before. Think about the progression from the earliest tools to the discovery of fire, the development of agriculture, the invention of writing, the rise of cities, and now the advent of modern technology.
Okay, like layers building up.
Exactly. Each of these steps represents a series of experiments where successful outcomes were passed down and further refined.
So these major shifts in human history, like the Neolithic Revolution or the Industrial Revolution, those were essentially large-scale experiments in how to live and organize ourselves.
Precisely. They weren't usually perfectly planned from the outset, but involved long periods of innovation, trying out new social structures and technologies, learning from what worked and what didn't, and gradually adapting.
Right.
And to manage the increasing complexity, we've developed social institutions like the family, systems of government, education, and economic systems. These are themselves products of historical experimentation in how to organize collective life and meet our fundamental needs.
But it's not always been a straightforward path of progress, is it? The source mentions the double-edged sword of cumulative culture. What does that mean?
That's right. While it's the engine of our progress, it can also lead to what are known as path dependencies, where we become locked into certain systems, like our reliance on fossil fuels, even when we recognize they have significant drawbacks.
Stuck in a rut, basically.
Kind of. These complex systems can also produce unintended negative consequences that then require new experiments to address. And the source makes a really crucial point about non-uniform experimental paths.
Meaning?
Different groups of humans living in diverse environments and facing unique historical circumstances have experimented with very different ways of life, resulting in the incredible cultural diversity we see across the globe. There's no single correct way to conduct this human experiment.
That makes sense. And what about the philosophical side of all this? How has this continuous experiment influenced our understanding of reality and knowledge itself?
The source takes us through the evolution of our understanding, from early myth-based explanations to the rise of rational inquiry in ancient Greece, culminating in the emphasis on empirical science during the scientific revolution. It's been a continuous process of refining how we experiment with and validate our understanding of the world around us. And then there's the enduring mystery of consciousness, our self-awareness, our internal experiences.
Right, a hard problem.
Exactly. While AI can simulate certain cognitive functions, it currently lacks that self-reflective awareness that is a defining characteristic of human consciousness.
And existentialist philosophies, the ideas of thinkers like Sartre and Camus, they're also a response to this human experiment. You mentioned them earlier.
Absolutely. They grapple with the implications of our fundamental freedom, the profound responsibility that comes with it, and the inherent anxiety of facing a universe that doesn't seem to have any preordained meaning. For existentialists, life is this ongoing experiment where we are constantly defining our own purpose through our choices and actions. It really aligns with this idea of life as an unfolding process. But the source also reminds us that purely rational thought has its limitations. Aspects of human experience like emotions, intuition, and faith aren't fully reducible to reason, yet they remain vital components of the human experiment.
And the development of fields like physics, mathematics, and logic, where do they fit into this grand scheme? Are they part of the experiment?
These are presented as monumental experiments in our quest to understand both the fundamental nature of the universe and the very structure of our own thought processes. Physics has evolved from early philosophical speculations to the complex and sophisticated theories of today.
Right.
Mathematics has proven to be remarkably effective at describing the physical world, which is a profound observation in itself. And logic provides us with the framework for coherent thought and for evaluating the validity of claims.
So are they discoveries or inventions?
Well, there's an ongoing debate about whether these formal systems are discoveries of pre-existing truths or are, in fact, inventions of the human mind. But regardless, they are incredibly powerful tools that have both emerged from and continue to shape our human experiment. However, the source also notes that even these highly formal systems have their limitations when it comes to capturing the full richness and complexity of human experience, particularly aspects like subjectivity and emotion. Gödel's work comes to mind there.
So we've looked at our biology, our history, our philosophy, our scientific endeavors.
Yeah.
What about our belief systems, religions, ideologies?
Yeah.
How have those shaped this human experiment?
Belief systems, whether they are religious, spiritual, philosophical, or ideological, are presented as fundamental mechanisms through which we attempt to make sense of the inherent complexities and uncertainties of life.
Okay.
They often fulfill deep psychological needs for security and order, serve social imperatives by promoting cohesion within groups, satisfy our cognitive drive to explain the unknown, and address the fundamental existential need for meaning in our lives.
So they serve multiple purposes.
Definitely. Cultural norms and values, which are essentially shared understandings that guide our behavior, are also products of past collective experiments. These deeply held beliefs in the broader cultural context significantly influence our states of mind, our levels of resilience, our experience of anxiety, and our overall sense of well-being.
Well,
However, the source also points out that belief systems can be a double-edged sword, offering comfort and meaning on one hand, but also potentially leading to rigid dogma and conflict on the other.
yeah, we see that a lot.
And the source touches on the powerful way in which our beliefs can actually shape our lived experience, almost like the placebo effect in medicine, belief becoming reality in a sense.
And finally, what about our emotional lives? The spectrum of human emotions, laughter, crying, anger, happiness, these are all part of this human experiment as well. Seems obvious, but how does the source frame it?
Absolutely. Emotions aren't just afterthoughts or reactions. They are fundamental to how we experience, interpret, navigate, and ultimately learn from the entirety of our lives. They serve as internal feedback mechanisms, powerfully motivate our actions, and play a crucial role in shaping our social connections. The source walks us through the adaptive functions of a range of emotions. happiness for promoting well-being and social bonding, crying as a release of distress and a way to elicit help, anger as a response to perceived injustice or threat, and even laughter and humor for fostering connection and releasing tension.
Right.
It's fascinating how both our culture and our individual differences can influence how we express and interpret emotions. And ultimately, emotions can be seen as crucial data points within this ongoing human experiment, signaling what's working well and what needs attention.
So even negative emotions are useful data.
Yes, even those emotions we often label as negative often serve vital adaptive roles, and attempting to eliminate them entirely might not be beneficial in the long run. Think about grief or fear.
Right. You need those signals. Okay, so we've explored how this human experiment has unfolded and the many ways it has impacted us. Now, how do we actually navigate it? What does that look like on both an individual and a societal level?
The source delves into this by first considering the individual experience. It brings up the enduring question of agency and the extent of our free will versus the influence of determinism.
The big questions.
Yeah. Existentialist thought, for example, emphasizes our radical freedom and sees life as a continuous act of self-creation through our choices. Then there's the important role of intuition, that often inexplicable gut feeling that can be so significant in our decision-making, particularly in situations where we don't have all the objective facts. The listener specifically asked about intuition, and the source highlights it as a form of real knowledge that is built upon our subconscious processing of information and our accumulated past experiences.
So it's not just random.
Not necessarily, no. It also addresses the vast differences in our individual circumstances, our genetic predispositions, our upbringing, the cultural environment we're immersed in, and the opportunities available to us, all of which create unique starting points and conditions for our personal experiments.
Right. Everyone's context is different.
Exactly. And of course, our individual personalities play a significant role in how we perceive and react to the world around us.
And on a larger scale, how do our societies react to and adapt within this ongoing human experiment? How does that work?
This is where social adaptation theory becomes relevant. It looks at how societies adjust to significant changes, whether they're cultural, technological, economic, or environmental. It requires a degree of flexibility, self-awareness as a collective, and constructive interaction among members. Social institutions like the family, education systems, government structures, and the economy serve as key mechanisms for managing this process of development and adaptation.
Right, the structures we build.
But it's important to remember that these very institutions are themselves products of past experiments and need to continuously evolve to remain effective. The source mentions models like the stages of change theory as a way to understand how societies adopt new behaviors or adapt to new realities, and social cognitive theory, which looks at the interplay between individual beliefs, the surrounding environment, and collective behavior in shaping societal responses.
But institutions can be slow to change too, right?
Absolutely. It's also important to acknowledge that there can be institutional inertia, a resistance to change, which can sometimes hinder necessary adaptive experiments.
Yeah.
And just like individuals, societies have followed diverse experimental paths, leading to the wide range of cultural expressions we observe globally. Current trends like globalization and digitalization can be seen as massive ongoing social experiments with far-reaching consequences.
The source also grapples with a really profound and often troubling question. Why do we witness so much cruelty and suffering in the world, especially when there are so many efforts focused on saving and improving lives? The listener asked about cruel people.
Yes, this delves into the philosophical problem of evil and psychological perspectives on the motivations behind why individuals inflict harm on others. Philosophically, it's about trying to reconcile the existence of evil with the concept of a benevolent and all-powerful God, or a fundamentally just universe.
Okay.
Psychologically, the source draws on the work of Baumeister, who suggests that perpetrators often don't perceive their actions as evil, but rather as justified or even necessary from their perspective.
Really? That's disturbing.
It is. He identifies several potential roots of such behavior: instrumental reasons, seeking personal gain; threatened egotism, acting to protect a fragile sense of self-worth; idealistic motivations, driven by deeply held beliefs, even good ones twisted; and sadistic impulses, deriving pleasure from the suffering of others. The concept of the magnitude gap, the significant difference in how victims and perpetrators perceive the harm caused, is also crucial. Mechanisms like dehumanization and moral disengagement can enable cruelty. Ultimately, cruelty can be understood as maladaptive experiments driven by complex underlying motivations rather than simply inherent evil. Understanding these motivations is a key step in prevention.
And finally, how do we come to terms with the ultimate realities of life and death within this ongoing human experiment? How does the source address that?
The awareness of our own mortality is a fundamental aspect of being human, and it profoundly influences our values and our search for meaning in life.
Yeah.
The listener inquired about what happens when a human life ends in the context of this experiment, and the source interprets this in several ways. It marks the end of an individual's direct participation.
Okay.
It raises the question of how those who are living cope with the death of others through grief, rituals, and beliefs about an afterlife or legacy. And it highlights the lasting impact and legacy of an individual's experiment on those who survive. Our pursuit of longevity can also be seen as part of how we deal with this fundamental aspect of our existence. Ultimately, death serves as an ultimate boundary condition that shapes the choices we make during our lives and our quest for meaning that might extend beyond our physical existence.
This naturally leads us to the really critical area of discussion, the ethics surrounding all these human experiments. How do we even begin to define right and wrong in this context? It seems so fundamental.
Ethics provides us with the frameworks for judging our actions and the structures of our societies, which is essential for social cohesion, cooperation, and progress that benefits humanity. Foundational principles like honesty, respect, fairness, and compassion are generally recognized as important. The idea of social responsibility emphasizes that our individual actions should ideally contribute to the well-being of society as a whole. The source points out that our moral systems themselves have evolved over time. They are, in a sense, experiments in how to best live together in a just and harmonious way.
So ethics itself is an experiment.
In a way, yes. There's often a tension between individual desires and the needs of the collective, and ethical frameworks attempt to navigate this complex terrain. While specific ethical rules might vary across cultures and time periods, there's an ongoing search for fundamental ethical tenets that have broad applicability, such as respect for others and the avoidance of harm. These ethical frameworks can be seen as products of past experiments in living together and also serve as guides for our future experiments.
And throughout history, we've certainly seen some truly horrific experiments where ethical considerations were completely disregarded. The source mentions some examples.
Yes, the source doesn't shy away from acknowledging the dark history of literal, unethical human experimentation, citing examples like the Tuskegee study and the atrocities committed during the Nazi era.
All right, terrible examples.
These serve as stark and sobering reminders of what can happen when fundamental human rights and dignity are ignored in the pursuit of knowledge or power. The Nuremberg Code, which arose directly from the horrors of World War II, with its strong emphasis on voluntary informed consent and the avoidance of unnecessary suffering, provides a crucial ethical baseline that continues to inform research and practice today.
Okay.
And in our contemporary world, we face new and complex ethical dilemmas arising from rapid technological advancements in fields like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence, which have the potential for profound and potentially irreversible consequences on individuals and society.
AI ethics is a really prominent topic right now.
Yeah.
What are some of the key ethical considerations in relation to this ongoing human experiment?
The source highlights several key areas of concern related to AI ethics, including issues around data privacy and security, the potential for algorithmic bias to lead to unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
Bias is a big one.
Huge. The lack of transparency in how some AI systems make decisions, the so-called black box problem, the potential for misuse of AI technologies, and the broader societal impacts of AI on employment, social interaction, and human autonomy.
Right.
The very development and deployment of AI can be seen as a massive experiment with significant ethical dimensions that are still being actively explored and debated. It underscores the importance of what's often called the precautionary principle, the idea that we should take preventative action to avoid potentially serious harm, even when we don't have complete scientific certainty about the long-term consequences.
Better safe than sorry.
Essentially. And in many modern technological experiments, the traditional lines between the experimenter and the subject are becoming increasingly blurred, as we see with things like social media and AI-driven personalization.
Yeah, we're all part of the experiment now.
Right. It raises new questions about ongoing consent, individual autonomy, and the potential for manipulation. This necessitates the development of new ethical frameworks that can grapple with these novel complexities.
And who ultimately benefits from all these human experiments,
Yeah.
is it truly beneficial for the most part, as the listener initially suggested, or is it more complicated?
The source challenges this assumption by pointing out that the benefits and the burdens of human endeavors are often not distributed equally across different groups or individuals.
Okay.
Various social forces, existing inequalities, and power dynamics can lead to some groups benefiting more significantly than others, while others may disproportionately bear the negative consequences. Even the very definition of what constitutes a benefit can be a subject of debate, varying across different cultures and individual perspectives.
Oh, like the Industrial Revolution example.
Exactly. It brought significant advancements, but also led to widespread environmental degradation and social upheaval for many. We also need to consider the concept of intergenerational justice, the long-term consequences of our current experiments on future generations who will inherit the planet, and the outcomes of our actions today.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Furthermore, it's crucial to recognize that power dynamics often influence who gets to initiate and control these experiments, and for whose ultimate benefit, with marginalized groups often facing the risk of negative impacts without having a strong voice in the process. Efforts towards achieving greater justice and equity, such as the civil rights movement, the fight for gender equality, and the environmental justice movement, can themselves be seen as significant human experiments aimed at redressing these historical and ongoing imbalances. The pursuit of justice is an ongoing and evolving process within the larger human experiment.
Finally, the connection between freedom and responsibility in all of this seems absolutely central. You touched on this before.
It is indeed. The listener asked specifically about freedom and human belief. And the source emphasizes that the concepts of freedom and responsibility are fundamental to ethical considerations.
Right.
Existentialist philosophy, for instance, strongly emphasizes our fundamental freedom as human beings and the accompanying responsibility for the choices we make and the consequences that follow. This applies not only at the individual level, but also collectively to the experiments we undertake as a society.
And teaching kids. The listener asked about that too.
Right. The listener also raised a question about teaching children, and education plays a vital role in fostering ethical awareness and a sense of responsible agency in future generations, helping them to navigate the complexities of the human experiment. Education itself is an evolving experiment, of course.
Yeah.
However, it's a complex interplay, as our individual freedoms and responsibilities operate within larger interconnected systems where our actions can aggregate and lead to unintended consequences at a broader scale. This highlights the ongoing need for understanding these systemic dynamics, practicing foresight in our actions, and engaging in collective action to balance individual freedom with the overall well-being of society and the planet.
So where does artificial intelligence fit into all of this?
Yeah.
How does it influence our understanding and our ability to shape these ongoing human experiments? It feels like a huge new factor.
It really does. The source offers a nuanced perspective here. While AI possesses the ability to process enormous amounts of data and identify intricate patterns related to human behavior and the outcomes of our various experiments, it currently lacks the self-awareness, consciousness, and the intrinsic human understanding of meaning that truly defines the human condition. Therefore, it can't fully comprehend our experiments in the same way that we do.
It doesn't get...
Not in the human sense, no. However, AI can be an incredibly powerful tool to augment our own philosophical inquiry and critical thinking, acting as a valuable cognitive partner in analyzing complex issues, summarizing vast amounts of information, identifying logical inconsistencies, and even simulating potential outcomes of different approaches.
Okay, so a powerful tool.
Yes, but we must remain cautious about anthropomorphizing AI, ascribing human-like qualities it doesn't possess, and remember that it is ultimately a tool, albeit a very sophisticated one.
Right.
AI models can also serve as mirrors, reflecting the patterns and biases present in the data we feed them from our own experiments, which can be both valuable in revealing hidden trends and limitations in reflecting the full picture.
Showing us ourselves, maybe warts and all.
Exactly. And as AI becomes more sophisticated and seemingly human-like in its interactions, it can create a sense of what the source calls existential uncanniness, which might paradoxically prompt us to reflect more deeply on the fundamental aspects of what it means to be human.
So AI can help us to understand and analyze, but how can it actually contribute to improving these human experiments going forward? What's the potential there?
The potential is significant across a number of areas. In terms of enhancing well-being, Emotion AI has the potential to offer personalized mental health support and create more tailored and responsive experiences. Although the source wisely cautions against solely aiming for constant positive feelings, as genuine well-being often involves navigating challenges and building resilience.
Right, back to the feeling good all the time thing.
Exactly. AI can also play a crucial role in improving our logic and decision-making processes by augmenting our critical thinking abilities and accelerating the pace of scientific discovery through advanced data analysis and hypothesis generation.
Like AlphaFold, maybe?
That's a great example.
Yeah.
In more practical applications, AI is already making significant strides in healthcare, improving disease diagnosis, assisting in surgery, accelerating drug discovery, personalizing treatment plans, and enabling remote patient monitoring. It also holds great promise for environmental management, from more accurate ecosystem monitoring and energy optimization to the development of sustainable agriculture, improved waste management, more efficient urban development, and more sophisticated climate modeling.
Wow, a lot of potential upsides.
Yes, it can even be applied to address complex societal challenges, such as optimizing urban planning, improving resource allocation, enhancing public safety, and potentially even helping to address issues of inequality. However,
Always a however.
always, it's crucial to reiterate that the ethical considerations are paramount. AI is a powerful amplifier, and it can just as easily amplify maladaptive tendencies or existing biases if not developed and deployed thoughtfully. Ultimately, the direction in which AI guides our experiments will depend on the human choices, values, and governance structures we put in place.
So, developing ethical AI is absolutely crucial for ensuring that these AI-assisted human experiments lead to beneficial outcomes. What are some of the core principles that need to guide this development?
The source outlines several core ethical principles for AI development, including beneficence and non-maleficence, the principles of doing good and avoiding harm, autonomy, respecting human decision-making capacity, justice, ensuring fairness and equity.
Justice seems key given the bias issue.
Absolutely. Explainability and transparency, making AI decision-making processes understandable, and accountability and responsibility for the actions of AI systems. A primary challenge in achieving these principles is addressing the pervasive issue of bias and discrimination in AI systems that can arise from biased or unrepresentative training data.
Right.
This necessitates the use of diverse data sets and rigorous bias audits throughout the development process. The importance of robust governance and regulatory oversight cannot be overstated, and this will require collaboration across various sectors. The principle of human in the loop, or maintaining meaningful human control in critical applications of AI, is also essential. Furthermore, there's the complex alignment problem, ensuring that AI systems act in accordance with human values and goals.
And whose values? That's the tricky part.
Exactly. This raises the fundamental question of whose values should be prioritized, highlighting the need for inclusive and participatory approaches to AI development. Ultimately, ethical AI development should be seen as an ongoing experiment in itself, requiring continuous learning, adaptation, and reflection.
The listener also had some specific questions about the relationship between AI and things like human intuition, the impact of differing human circumstances, and the physical aspects of our lives. How does AI intersect with those?
Right. Regarding intuition, the source explains that current AI, while capable of sophisticated pattern recognition, lacks the embodied, subconscious form of human intuition that arises from our complex lived experiences.
So it doesn't have gut feelings.
Not like we do, no. However, AI might indirectly contribute to our intuitive abilities by broadening our experiential base through access to vast amounts of information, although there's also a potential risk of over-reliance that could lead to an atrophy of our own intuitive capacities.
Interesting trade-off. What about differing circumstances?
On the topic of differing human circumstances, AI has significant potential for personalization in areas like education, healthcare, and assistive technologies. But there's a critical challenge in ensuring that these personalized systems do not inherit and even amplify existing societal biases.
Right. The amplification risk again?
Yes, requiring a strong focus on principles of justice and fairness, diverse training data, ongoing bias audits, and equitable access to these technologies.
Physical aspects, robots and stuff.
As for the physical aspects of our lives, AI is increasingly having a tangible impact through robotics, advanced healthcare devices, and in the management of our physical environment, making issues of safety, reliability, and ethical oversight in these physically acting AI systems paramount.
Okay.
Finally, the source notes that AI currently lacks the first-person emotional experience that is so crucial for deep human empathy, suggesting that its role in deeply emotional and relational aspects of the human experiment will likely remain assistive rather than fully replacing human interaction.
So As we bring this all together, what's the overarching picture here? What are the likely future trajectories as humans and AI continue to co-evolve within this experiment of life?
Right.
Where are we heading?
The source concludes by summarizing that the human experiment in the age of AI is a continuation of our fundamental biological and cultural evolution, our reliance on trial and error learning, and our enduring quest for meaning. But now, with the powerful presence of AI acting as a sophisticated analyst, a potential partner, and a significant challenge to many of our long-held human concepts.
Analyst-partner challenge.
Okay. AI has the potential to contribute to improvements in various aspects of our lives, aligning with the principles of well-being captured in the PERMA model. But we need to be careful about the trap of solely aiming for constant positive feelings and instead focus on fostering empowerment, critical thinking, ethical awareness, equitable access, and the pursuit of authentic meaning. This involves carefully considering the mitigation of suffering versus the potential for eliminating all forms of discomfort, which can be a catalyst for growth. The future is likely to be defined by an increasingly intertwined co-evolutionary trajectory where humans and AI continuously shape each other.
A co-evolution.
Yes, this meta-experiment of responsibly developing, governing, and integrating AI into our lives will depend heavily on our collective wisdom, foresight, a commitment to collaboration, and a firm grounding in human-centered values.
Right.
As AI takes on more tasks, we may need to reevaluate our understanding of what constitutes a quality life and explore new experiments in finding meaning and purpose in areas like creativity, human relationships, emotional intelligence, philosophical exploration, and community engagement.
Finding new ways to be human, almost.
Perhaps. Ultimately, the human experiment remains a story of ongoing striving, continuous learning, the persistent creation of meaning, and constant adaptation. With AI now serving as a powerful companion that comes with both immense potential and inherent risks, guiding the development and integration of AI with our core human values, and effectively teaching future generations how to navigate this complex landscape responsibly may be the most crucial experiment of all.
So to wrap things up, we've really taken a deep dive into this fascinating concept of human experiments, this continuous and multifaceted process of living, adapting, and our inherent search for meaning, and explored the ways in which the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence is now intersecting with this fundamental human journey. It's clear that these ideas have profound relevance to your own understanding of the world and your own pursuit of well-being.
Absolutely. And it leads us to a final thought for you to consider, perhaps something to mull over. Given AI's increasing and multifaceted role in our lives, how might our fundamental understanding of what it means to be human itself evolve in the coming decades?
It's a really big question, and we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas and perhaps even share your own reflections or any follow-up questions that might arise.
Thank you for sharing your insightful sources with us and for embarking on this thought-provoking deep dive.
This is DigitView.